She was dazzling in her red dress that night. Hours later, I found her upstairs with her boss. But before that, it was just another Christmas party. Or at least that's what I told myself. Her company went all out every December. Rented banquet halls, open bars, a DJ spinning holiday classics that bled into pop songs, the kind of party where everyone tried too hard to look like family, when really they were coworkers desperate for free drinks and gossip. I had been to a few over the years, sometimes bored, sometimes amused, always the tag-along husband trying to fit into her world. That night, though, she looked electric. The red dress hugged her in all the right ways, sequins catching the light from the chandelier overhead. She was radiant, laughing at the front door before we even hung up our coats, greeting everyone like she'd been waiting for this all year. I told myself it was just the holiday spirit, the wine, the music, the relief of the year finally winding down. The room was filled with the usual holiday cheer, servers weaving through with trays of champagne flutes, coworkers crowding the buffet, some already a little too tipsy, laughing too loud. I tried to enjoy it, sipping my drink, nodding along to conversations about year-end businesses and vacation plans. But even then, in the blur of music and laughter, something in my gut felt unsettled. I didn't know it yet, but that party wasn't about mistletoe or cheer. It was the night I was about to lose my wife. In the months leading up to that party, a single name kept threading through our conversations, like a refrain I didn't ask for: Victor. It started small, casual mentions over dinner about deadlines and approvals, about how Victor wants the deck tighter, or how Victor's pushing for a bolder campaign. Normal, I told myself. I've had bosses too. I know how they can take up space in your head. But repetition has weight, and his name grew heavy in our house. There were little shifts I tried not to notice. She used to talk about coworkers as a group, the team, we, us. Then it became, he thinks, he said, he's got a different vision. Somewhere along the line, my wife stopped orbiting a team and started revolving around a son named Victor. I learned his preferences the way you learn a neighbor's routines without trying. He liked morning stand-ups earlier than everyone else. He always respected hustle. He hated vague answers, loved tough feedback, believed in stretch roles, and wore the kind of confidence that turned every hallway into a runway. She said these things like they were facts about weather in a city we didn't choose to live in. Late nights multiplied. Not every night, just enough to become a pattern. At first, she framed them as crunch time before a product launch. Then, crunch time before the board presentation. Then, crunch time because Victor's raising the bar. The bar kept moving, and with it, our dinners. I ate alone more often, stirring a pot I'd made for two. She texted that she'd be late, ending with a heart that might as well have been a period. I heard his voice once on speaker by accident, a quick, clipped cadence, the kind people mistake for leadership because it never hesitates. She snatched the phone off the kitchen counter so fast the cord clinked against the tile. Sorry, work. No apology for the reflex, just speed. A habit already formed. Her wardrobe shifted too. Not dramatic, not neon signs, just quieter signals. Jackets that meant business. Dresses that said photos might happen. Heels that didn't forgive long days, but demanded them. The old tote bag gave way to a structured leather one. Lipstick shades slid warmer. When I commented that she looked sharp, she smiled, but her eyes were already somewhere else. I kept telling myself to be reasonable. Ambition is its own language, and she'd always been fluent. She climbed because she could. I loved that about her. But work used to be a ladder we both saw. Lately, it felt like an elevator I wasn't allowed to ride. At home, his name threaded through weekend errands and weeknight dishes. Not gushing, not blatant, worse, ordinary. I'd ask how her day went, and the answer was a story about Victor's wild idea, or classic move, or you know how he gets. No, I didn't know how he got. I only knew how my wife was getting, tuned to one station. There were signs I swallowed because marriage teaches you to pick your battles. She laughed at her phone more, but not the kind of laugh that invites you in. Notifications came with a new urgency. Screen flipped face down on the table, then moved to her pocket. "It's nothing," she said once, and the phrase hung there for a long time after. December arrived, and with it, the party, wrapped in gold invitations and RSV links. She was more excited than I'd ever seen her for a corporate event. "The venue's gorgeous this year," she said, describing lights and a balcony and a private upstairs lounge reserved for leadership and plus ones. The way she said leadership had a shine to it, like she was pronounced adjacent. I ironed my shirt the afternoon of the party, listening to her hum in the bathroom while she did makeup. The tune wasn't familiar, but the energy was. It reminded me of our early dates. Anticipation that made her move faster than usual. I wanted that to be about me. I knew it wasn't. When she stepped out in that red dress, time hiccuped. She looked undeniable. She kissed my cheek, left a print I didn't wipe away. "Big night," she said, smoothing fabric that didn't need smoothing. "Everyone's going to be there." I told myself to be proud, to clap for the life she was building. It wasn't jealousy that troubled me. It was the sense of being edited out, the guest at his own marriage. On the drive over, she talked timelines and strategies, the way you talk before a race, light on specifics, heavy on adrenaline. She mentioned the after-party like an afterthought. "Just a small group if we go at all," she said. "Victor might want to toast the quarter." His name, again, a compass needle finding north. The hotel glimmered with lights strung over glossy marble, wreaths pinned like medals. We handed over coats, and she exhaled in that way people do when they've arrived where they wish to be. I caught our reflection in a mirrored pillar. Her dress a streak of red, my suit a dark outline beside it. And for a second, we looked like a couple in balance. Then someone called her name, and the mirror told a different story. I was already on the periphery. I'm not the type to see ghosts in every shadow, but patterns are just truths you've seen too often to ignore. In the months before the party, Victor had become weather in our house, and I knew storms don't need lightning to be real. They just need pressure. So, when the double doors swung open to a room full of silver napkins and sparkling glasses, I promised myself one thing. I would pay attention. Not to catch her, not to make a case. To know, finally, if what I felt in my gut had a face. It did. I just wasn't ready to see it yet. The holiday party buzzed with music, clinking glasses, and the kind of laughter that comes too easily when people are drinking for free. I tried to enjoy myself, made small talk with a few of her coworkers, even laughed at a couple of bad jokes from the finance team. But my attention kept circling back to Evelyn. She looked radiant in that red dress, too radiant. And every so often, I caught the way her eyes drifted across the room. They always landed on him. Gavin, her boss. It wasn't subtle, at least not to me. She'd smile at a colleague, nod at someone's story, but her eyes would flicker toward Gavin, like he was the real center of gravity in that ballroom. I noticed how she straightened her shoulders when he laughed, how her hand lingered on the stem of her wine glass when he walked past. It was the kind of body language that speaks louder than words. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was being the insecure husband who sees monsters where there are none. But something in her expression betrayed her. That kind of longing isn't for a boss. It isn't for a mentor. It's for someone you're already too close to. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I stood there, sipping a bourbon I barely tasted, and wondered how long this had been going on right in front of me. The band had just switched from Christmas standards to something louder, the kind of music that rattled the glasses on the tables. People were loosening ties, heels were coming off, and conversations blurred into the hum of the crowd. I was halfway through my second bourbon when I realized Evelyn wasn't standing beside me anymore. At first, I thought nothing of it. Parties like this had a rhythm. People drifted off to chat with coworkers, to grab another drink, to snap a photo near the oversized Christmas tree in the lobby. I figured she was making the rounds, doing what good employees do at these things, mingling, laughing, being seen. But minutes stretched longer than they should have. I circled the room once, weaving between tables, peering over shoulders. No red dress, no familiar laugh, just clusters of faces I didn't know well enough to interrupt. I checked the bar, empty. I checked the coat-room hallway, nothing. I even lingered by the dance floor, scanning for her among the crowd. Still no sign. The unease that had been flickering in me all evening started to grow. It wasn't just that I couldn't find her. It was the way my memory replayed the earlier glances, the way her eyes seemed magnetized toward Gavin, her boss. I thought of the little shift in her smile when he entered the room. Subtle, but not invisible. By the time 20 minutes had passed, my glass was sweating in my hand, untouched. I was telling myself to stay calm, not to jump to conclusions. But when your gut knots like that, when it whispers that something is wrong, it's not paranoia, it's instinct. And instinct told me she wasn't just lost in the crowd anymore. I had just stepped out into the hallway for some air, telling myself not to spiral, when a voice stopped me. "Hey." It was a guy from Evelyn's department, Paul, I think his name was. We'd spoken once or twice before at smaller gatherings, always polite, never much more than passing small talk. But the way he looked at me now wasn't casual. His eyes flicked around, like he was checking to make sure no one was listening. "You looking for Evelyn?" he asked, quietly. Something in his tone made my chest tighten. I tried to keep my face neutral. "Yeah, I haven't seen her in a while." Paul hesitated, shifting his weight like he wasn't sure if he should say anything. Finally, he leaned in. "I probably shouldn't be saying this, but you might want to check upstairs." My stomach dropped. "Upstairs?" He gave me a tight, uncomfortable nod. "Conference rooms. They opened one of them for the ex and their guests. I saw her heading that way a little while ago, with Gavin." The name hit like a hammer I'd been waiting for all night. Gavin. The boss who had crept into our house through conversations, late nights, little smiles. The man who had become a shadow in my marriage before I even recognized it. For a second, the whole room seemed to tilt. The muffled bass of the music pounded against the walls, distant but mocking. The laughter and clinking glasses downstairs might as well have been miles away. All I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears and Paul's voice echoing in my head. With Gavin. I wanted to brush it off, to tell myself Paul was mistaken, that he'd misread the situation. But deep down, I knew he hadn't. He'd seen something he thought I deserved to know, even at the risk of crossing a line. "Thanks," I said, my voice flat, controlled. Too controlled. Paul gave me a sympathetic look, the kind people give when they know the next few minutes of your life are about to change forever. Then he slipped back into the crowd, leaving me alone in the hallway, staring at the staircase that led to the upper floor. I stood there for a long moment, trying to summon the courage to move. Each second dragged, the weight of suspicion pressing heavier against my chest. I thought of her in that red dress,
dazzling and untouchable just hours earlier. I thought of every time she'd said Gavin's name with that subtle glimmer in her eyes. I thought of the silence at our dinner table on nights she worked late, the excuses about deadlines that always seemed to coincide with him. And then I thought of Paul's face, the way he couldn't look me in the eye when he said it, the way his voice dropped low, heavy with pity. That was when I knew. Whatever waited upstairs, it wasn't just work. It wasn't just a harmless conversation in a quiet room. It was the truth, waiting like a blade in the dark, daring me to walk into it. So, I did.
I straightened my jacket, drew a long, steady breath, and started climbing the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The music and laughter dulled with every step I took upward, replaced by the creak of the staircase beneath my shoes and the heavy thud of my own heartbeat. The air felt colder up there, like the heat and cheer of the party hadn't bothered to climb this far. I moved slowly, not because I wanted to, but because my body refused to go any faster. Every step was like dragging a weight I hadn't asked to carry. I kept my hand on the railing, not for balance, but to keep myself grounded, because my mind was already racing ahead, painting pictures I didn't want to see. At the landing, the hallway stretched out in front of me. Dim sconces cast weak pools of light against beige walls, sterile and businesslike compared to the sparkle downstairs. A line of closed doors waited, each one holding the potential for relief or ruin. I could hear muffled sounds, a laugh, footsteps, the low hum of conversation. Most of it belonged to the spillover from the party below. But one sound, faint and irregular, snagged my attention. A giggle. It was hers. I knew that sound better than my own name. I froze in place, my breath catching in my throat. For a split second, every part of me wanted to turn around, to go back downstairs, to pretend I hadn't heard it, to let suspicion stay suspicion. Because once I opened that door, once I saw whatever was waiting on the other side, there would be no undoing it. But the thing about dread is that it doesn't go away if you ignore it. It festers. It grows. And I had lived too long already with the shadow of Gavin in my house. So I moved. Step by step, I followed the sound. The carpet muffled my footsteps, but in my head they boomed like gunshots. My throat was dry, my palms damp. I reached the door at the end of the hall, the one cracked just enough to let a sliver of light bleed through. The giggle came again, softer this time, followed by a hushed murmur in a man's voice. His voice. Gavin's. My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling not with fear, but with the weight of knowing I was 1 second away from rewriting my life. And then I pushed. The door gave way with the quietest click, but to me it was deafening. The narrow gap widened, and the sliver of light spilled across the hall, pulling me into the room like a current. Inside, the world slowed. Evelyn was there, my wife, the one I'd walked into this party with, the one who had kissed my cheek an hour earlier. She was perched on the edge of the long conference table, her red dress riding up in a way that wasn't accidental. Her hands were braced behind her, body tilted toward him. And him, Gavin, shirt untucked, tie loosened, standing between her knees with his head lowered dangerously close to her neck. His hand rested on her thigh, casual and claiming, like it belonged there. They didn't see me at first.
They were wrapped in their own little orbit, their laughter hushed but easy, like this wasn't the first time. Like they'd been here before, if not in this exact room, then in this moment. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My whole body felt pinned to the doorway, every nerve screaming but refusing to let me collapse. I think a part of me still wanted to believe I was misunderstanding, that if I blinked hard enough, the scene would rearrange itself into something innocent. But there's no misinterpreting the way a man stands between a woman's legs, or the way she leans into it. And then Evelyn turned her head, her eyes catching mine over Gavin's shoulder. Time stopped. Her smile shattered, her face draining of color in an instant. Gavin turned too, confused at first, then straightening quickly when he saw me standing there. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He didn't need to say anything. The guilt written all over them was more than enough. That moment burned into me deeper than any scar. It wasn't the dress, or the hand, or the kiss that almost happened. It was her eyes, wide, panicked, caught. Eyes that told me the truth I had been trying not to see for months. Eyes that told me my marriage had ended long before I walked through that door. For a heartbeat, rage swallowed me whole. My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms, and every instinct screamed to drag Gavin away from her, to tear the smug look off his face before it had a chance to settle there. My chest burned with it, the kind of fury that makes men do things they regret forever. But then, something steadier rose up, heavier than anger, clarity. Because what good would it do? To shout, to swing, to give them a spectacle they could twist later into he overreacted or he embarrassed himself? No, that wasn't going to be me. I wasn't going to let them write the story of this night. So I stood there, silent, my jaw locked, my stare cutting through both of them. Evelyn scrambled to pull her dress down, her hands trembling as though fabric could undo what I'd already seen. Gavin mumbled something about being too drunk, words that fell flat in the thick air between us. Excuses had no weight here. I didn't speak, not yet. The silence did the work for me. It pressed down on them harder than any shouted accusation could have. Evelyn's face flushed, her eyes darting from me to the floor, then back to me again, pleading without words. Gavin stepped back, tugging at his tie, suddenly small in the shadow of his own arrogance. Inside, the fury boiled. I wanted to scream, to ask her how long, to ask him why my marriage was his playground. But I swallowed it all, letting the anger condense into something sharper, something colder, a knife instead of a hammer. Finally, I stepped into the room, slow and deliberate. My shoes thudded against the carpet, each step a reminder that I wasn't going to be the man begging for answers or throwing punches. I was going to be the man who remembered everything, every detail, every excuse, every lie that would follow.
And that restraint, that choice not to explode, was what scared them most. Because when a man doesn't shout, doesn't lash out, doesn't lose control, you know he's already planning something bigger. She was the first to speak, of course. Her voice was shaky, rushed, laced with panic, but softened by the alcohol still on her breath. "Mark, it's not what it looks like," she stammered, tugging at the hem of her dress as if fabric could rewrite reality. "We were just talking. He leaned in too close. I was telling him to back off." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. Talking. That was her excuse? Standing there on the edge of a conference table with her boss between her knees? If that was a conversation, it was one you don't need words for. She stepped toward me, wobbling slightly on her heels. "I've had too much to drink. I wasn't thinking. You know how these parties are." Her words slurred at the edges, as if she hoped I would chalk it all up to champagne and dim lights. But alcohol doesn't invent desire. It only strips away the masks that usually hide it. Behind her, Gavin cleared his throat, straightening his shirt, trying to reassemble some dignity. "Look, man, it just got out of hand." I held up a hand and cut him off without a word. My eyes never left hers. She kept going, desperate now, her excuses spilling over themselves. "I love you. You know I love you. I don't know why I let it get this far. It was stupid, a mistake. I swear it won't—" Her voice cracked, but I didn't move, didn't speak. I let her twist in the silence, let her pile lie upon lie, excuse upon excuse, until the words lost all meaning. Because the truth was, I didn't need an explanation. I'd already seen everything I needed to see. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't expected. Her drunken scrambling didn't hurt me. It disgusted me. More than her laughter with Gavin, more than his hand on her thigh, more than the betrayal itself. The sight of her scrambling for excuses was what finally killed whatever I had left for her. She wasn't fighting for me. She was fighting for herself, for the story she could spin, for the image she could salvage. And I wasn't interested in playing along. The Monday after the party, the air in our house felt different, thicker, heavier, like every wall knew what had happened upstairs in that conference room. Evelyn tried to carry on as though we could just sweep it under the rug, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted toward me when she thought I wasn't looking, wide with a nervous hope that I might forget what I saw. I didn't. I couldn't. She left early for work, claiming she had back-to-back meetings, but I knew better. Walking into that office now would be like stepping onto a stage. Whispers spread fast in places like hers, faster than holiday cheer. And sure enough, by the end of the week, it wasn't just me who knew what she'd done. It was half the company. One of her coworkers, Paul again, pulled me aside when I stopped by to drop something off she'd forgotten. He shook his head, lowering his voice. "People are talking. Some of them saw you go upstairs that night. They know what you walked in on." His face carried pity, but underneath I caught a flicker of disgust, not for me, but for her. Office gossip wasn't kind, and in this case, it wasn't wrong. At home, the tension curdled. Evelyn oscillated between begging and snapping. One evening she sobbed, swearing she'd had too much to drink, promising me Gavin meant nothing. The next night, her temper flared when I didn't answer fast enough, accusing me of enjoying making her suffer. That swing, remorse one moment, anger the next, only widened the canyon between us. And Gavin? He handled it like men in his position often do. Quietly, strategically. I heard he downplayed the whole thing to HR, brushing it off as misinterpreted flirting. But there's only so much damage control a man can do when too many eyes have seen too much. His reputation took a hit, whispers shadowing him through the halls, just as they shadowed Evelyn. The fallout wasn't dramatic, not at first. It was slower, like ice cracking underfoot. Every step we took at home, every move she made at work, carried that sharp question beneath it. When is it going to give way? I stayed composed, outwardly calm, even when she tried to bait me into shouting. I didn't raise my voice, didn't lose my ground, because deep down, I already knew. What broke that night at the Christmas party couldn't be repaired by tears or promises. The damage wasn't just to our marriage, it was to the very idea of us.
And once that's gone, there's nothing left to salvage. By the time New Year's rolled around, the house felt like a waiting room, silent, stale, filled with two people sitting side by side, but already miles apart. Evelyn still tried, in fits and starts, to glue the cracks together. She cooked dinners she never used to make, set the table with candles like she was staging a scene for a magazine. She even bought me a new watch, slid it across the table like a bribe, her eyes searching mine for even a flicker of forgiveness. But it was all noise. None of it could erase what I saw upstairs. None of it could make me unhear the giggle that had lured me down that hallway. Every gesture was tainted, every word recycled, every kiss she attempted on my cheek feeling like theft. And me? I stayed calm, detached, not cruel, not cold, just resolute. I didn't scream, I didn't accuse. I let her run herself ragged trying to patch a ship that had already sunk. Because I knew something she didn't yet. This wasn't her story anymore. It was mine. So one evening, I laid it out. The truth, the final line, the end. She hadn't wanted, but had already chosen.
"I'm filing," I said simply, sliding the papers across the table. My voice didn't waver, and for once, she didn't try to argue. She just stared at them, her hands trembling, the red polish on her nails chipped at the edges. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I am," I said. "You ended it at that party. I'm just giving it a name." She broke then, tears, shaking, the same litany of excuses and pleas I'd heard 100 times since that night. But none of it reached me. I wasn't listening for her anymore. I was listening to myself, to the voice inside me that had finally stopped begging me to endure. Ending it wasn't about punishing her. It wasn't about revenge or making a scene. It was about reclaiming the dignity she thought I'd lost the night I opened that door. About walking away with my head high instead of living in the shadow of her betrayal. And as her sobs filled the kitchen, I felt something I hadn't in months: relief. Because I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was choosing myself. 2 years have passed since that night at the Christmas party, and sometimes it feels like another lifetime. I don't think about her every day anymore. At first I did. Every quiet morning, every empty evening carried the echo of her absence. But over time, the weight lifted. What once felt like a gaping wound turned into a scar, visible but no longer painful when I touched it. The divorce went through smoother than I expected. She fought me on some things, tried to claw back control in places where she'd already lost it, but I stayed steady. I didn't let anger drive the process. I let truth do the work. The courts don't care about tears or excuses. They care about facts. And the fact was, our marriage ended the night I found her with her boss. She stayed at the company for a while, though not for long. Word spreads fast in offices, and respect is harder to earn back than money. From what I heard, Gavin's reputation never recovered either. Promotions that once seemed certain vanished. Opportunities passed them both by. Maybe that was karma. Maybe just the way the world handles people who gamble with other people's lives. As for me, I built something new. I moved into a smaller house, one that felt like mine from the moment I turned the key. I filled it with things I chose: books, records, furniture without memories stitched into the cushions. I found peace in the little routines: making coffee in the quiet, going for long runs at dawn, sitting on the porch at night with no one to answer to. I even started dating again, slowly, carefully, not searching for replacements, not trying to fill an empty space, just meeting people, laughing again. It turns out trust can grow back. Not quickly, not easily,
but steadily, if you let it. Looking back, I realize I didn't really lose my wife at that Christmas party. I lost her months before, in the late nights, the secret smiles, the silences filled with someone else's name. What I found that night wasn't the end of us. It was the truth finally showing itself in full. And though it broke me in the moment, I see it now for what it really was: freedom disguised as betrayal. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you can't control what someone else chooses to do behind closed doors, but you can control how you walk away once you see it. And I walked away with my dignity intact, leaving the lies behind, carrying only myself into the life that waited. A life that, 2 years later, feels more mine than it ever did before.